Part 2 of the Returning from Summer Hiatus special bonus episode. Cosmic Electro 101. Live to tape. Experimental music production by an animatronic digital robot. We were talking about and recapping some of the thoughts from the last two-parter episode before I went on a little month-long summer hiatus. The two other big things that I rambled on incoherently about in those episodes, and yes, folks, I get it. Some days it is atrocious, and I apologize. Some days, though, it trips trippingly off the tongue as if I wrote it for the stage, and even I am a little bit surprised because I don't know where it comes from. But the two things I talked about worth discussing now as DJ Zed winds up this bit-o music experience. The golden rule. Not as some imposition about how you should behave, but as a magical axiom of reality that you indeed are one and the same with everyone else. Not because God told you to treat them like your higher soul, but because everyone is a manifestation of one cosmic higher soul, one oversoul of humanity, bifurcating itself infinitely in a fractal gasmic process of emanation and literally manifesting the individuated experience that is you, is also them, is also everyone. That's what I meant when I rambled on incoherently about the golden rule. Not follow it because somebody so-and-so told you to. But find the spiritual inner work that allows you to directly phenomenologically confirm that your body avatar is a divine chariot, a seat, a chair, a puppet for this cosmic, universal, spiritual meta soul, this being beyond the scope of your individual small fractal life. Your one little life here is just an expression of the soul that is expressing all life. And the final thing over there from those two episodes that I realize I need to go back and like updraft and pick clean in post-production and or just totally replace with a better recording. And that's that not only is there an infinite universe of universes in an infinity of timelines, you are a macro-microverse yourself. Your individuality is individuality in part by function because your being houses an expression of an infinity of yourselves in a inverse golden, spiral of all possible probability waveform functions of what your life can, could, should, would, might have had, is becoming, and that is not some just highfalutin yada yada theoretical that sounds cool and makes for trippy visuals when you include it in action sequences for superhero movies, right? It is the metaphysics, the fractal ism, and I hate ism because I hesitate every time I walk up to that word and it sounds like I've got to use it because we need something else. We don't need an ism, like political ism. We don't need a religious ism. We don't need a spiritual ism. We don't need a new ism. But I digress, folks. So the implications of the fractal nature of reality splayed out with an L, fanned out, unfold out before us in fascinating ways. And should not these are not ideas just to be oohed and awed and then dismissed. They are tangible, meaningful, esoteric understandings that might actually facilitate our own development and boost the well-being of everyone, if taken to their logical conclusions through a cumulative, collective community investigation that we have hitherto not quite endeavored in quite yet. Not to the levels and scale which I propose or imagine. But I digress. I was talking about verifiable, confirmable, repeatable, evidence-based information, right? And that I try to work that way. I try not to say crazy highfalutin things without having some of that stuff. Let me interject in a preemptive apology. Do I sometimes fail at this and all the other things that I talk about? But of course, dear friends, you betcha. But also, if I may be so bold, I challenge you to introduce me to someone other than Buddha, other than Yeshua, other than Krishna, someone that never has failed at one of or all of these things that we challenge ourselves with. And that's a humbling thing. And I don't throw that out there just as a cheeky, a spunky thing to say. It's a profound thing that should bring us into a deeper communion as opposed to separate us apart with a wider wedge of treadmill of distraction. Forgive the extra self-meta commentary abstraction that is this particular triptych of episodes. The last two in this episode, friends, for anyone who's confused as to what the bloody hell I'm talking about and why I'm sort of just making declarative statements. This is all meta commentary about the nature and flow and function of my podcast and what I'm trying to do with it. So, brace yourselves. My story gets better. It's almost there. In terms of wrapping this episode up, I feel it is important to declare as a disclaimer the following. I have said this before on the episode, on various episodes, and I will very likely have to say it again. So please take note and bear witness. I have never, all caps, never, and I'm not angry about it, I'm just making sure it's very clear to people in their minds. I have never claimed to have achieved quote, enlightenment, close quote, or, quote, awakening, close quote. And I'll say it again for emphasis. I have never claimed to have achieved enlightenment or awakening, despite the curious fact that people have, throughout my lifetime, awkwardly accused me of having done so all the time, and I don't get it. And as a matter of historical fact, I have never claimed, I've never said I am enlightened. I literally, quote, I am enlightened, has never come out of my mouth in a meaningful way, other than to say it in a sentence like this, to assert to you that I have not claimed it. And yet people come at me after, a brief glance of some spiritual commentary of some sort on something they saw or read or heard 5 seconds of, and they're like, well, you're so special and you're so enlightened and you're so such, and like, nope, sorry, never claimed that. Don't know why you're throwing that mud at me. It's not helping your argument because you're wrong. Like, I just have not, I factually have never made that claim. In fact, I argue quite adamantly all the time that it is the height of hubris at this point in time and history to be claiming to be actually fully and completely enlightened for a bunch of various technical reasons, some of which I went into great detail in the last episode, some of which I'll go into great detail in a future episode. But the key one being that unless you can deploy your, 12th dimensional multi-chakra of many chakras chakra system with the fully functional Merkaba chariot of light, and you can instantly transmute your physical ambulatory meat sack made of blood and bone into pure living conscious light in order to teleport anywhere in the world, up to and including while I am live on the air here in my home studio / office where I can interview you. Unless you're at that level of mastery, and I get it, there may very well be some people or someone out there that technically, theoretically is. Do I know them? No. Have they ever turned up despite my persistent invitations? Not yet. If they were a pre-existing, already completed, fully awakened, enlightened master walking amongst us, wouldn't they be completely capable of just knowing that I was inviting them to show up incorporeally and yet still, visible and tangible and hearable? I would venture, if all of that stuff were actually true, then yes, they would. And yes, they could. And yes, they should. And yet they don't. And I'm not judging anything about it, right? Like, I'm not, that statement is not meant to cast aspersions at anyone. My point is that there are, and this is, again, not a judgmental thing, it's just a statement of fact, there are a lot of people from all walks of life, from all kinds and types of settings and reasons for which I find that are saying, to some degree or another, of taking themselves seriously, I am awakened, I am enlightened. And while I don't want to rain on anybody's parade, and I don't want to be a big poo-poo wet towel about it, if your statements are nuanced and self-aware and acknowledge that you're not the Buddha yet, and that you're not doing all those other things and transmuting into pure light, and that you mean something other, then cool. And I don't mean to sound snarky about it, but we need better language than that, because, it's just, I'm a word-ophile. I really want the words to be clearly used according to their meaning. To be enlightened means to have done the 12D chakra Merkaba deployment and transmuted the physical body avatar into whatever the next stage is, right? Which is often described as pure, living, conscious light. Don't get me wrong, I am not making the argument that such a thing is not possible, which is the other ridiculous thing that I get accused of totally incorrectly by people all the time. Different set of people. What I am saying and what I am doing is commenting on the concept and attempting to arrive at a working, potential, possible, as in like feasible, working theoretical thesis that is an attempt at describing the means by which those things might or could be successfully pursued or investigated. As I put it quite directly, I am of the humble opinion that enlightenment, the actual, full and complete, as is described in, what is it, Matthew, blah, 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 I always get the numbers wrong. But the eyes are the light of the body. If thine eye be singular, then thy body shall be made up of light. I am of the opinion that that kind of transformational, evolutionary change is indeed the birthright, not of some special individual necessarily, although there will be some special individual which will sort of like activate themselves quite likely, but of the whole species. For as many of the prior, mythologized and abused prophets commonly said, although people tend to ignore this because of all the distractionary things that get thrown into the mix, most all of the, beatific, special golden ones of history said some form of this kingdom, this power, this magic is within you. But we'll put a pin in that little note and stick it up to the giant corkboard to the left and up in the imaginary room in which we share when we have these prolonged discussions, dear friends. For we must come back to it. I need to zip through the rest of the things I'd planned for this episode or risk making it unbearably long. I believe, and I don't use that word very often for reasons I've already nerded out about on the show before. So there are very few things that I give my power of belief to, but I believe that as a society, all of us, all together, we ought to perhaps, just maybe, turn our collective attention to the investigation of such things in a hitherto, in a way that we have hitherto not quite pursued them, right? In a serious way that that arguably we've never been quite serious about this before. For the purposes of verifying, not in a dogmatic, ideologically driven, you must believe this because we talked you into believing it kind of way, but in, as I talked about before, in a phenomenological way. Verifying and potentially confirming and presuming that there's something to be found there, eventually manifesting such transformational and evolutionary changes in the human species as, getting up there to actually transmuting ourselves and becoming beings of pure light. Because clearly, call me crazy, you wouldn't be the first, if we were all beings of pure light, a lot of the political shenanigans and malarkey that is simultaneously absurd and meaningless, but also damaging to people in real terms, wouldn't even be entertained by anyone. Or so it would seem. Having said that, friends, I want to assure to you, by way of meta commentary, that I am in no way attempting to mislead, deceive, nor bullshit anyone with what I say. I am not here to argue. I am not here to coerce anyone into blind-faithedly agreeing and getting into lockstep and goose-step with me. I'm here to discuss and debate, to share and compare. I'm here to compare and contrast, to say, hey, I think this, and maybe also a little bit of this. What do you guys think? I am here to ask real questions. I don't ask malarkey questions that don't go anywhere and that are only designed to confuse or muddy the waters or coerce people into buying into a preconceived notion or a packaged set of talking points. I ask the real questions in pursuit of real answers. I share the observations I have made, not over the last 7 minutes, but over a lifetime of making impartial observations. And whether you think it's possible or not, I have literally been this kind of analytical creature of the mind since Ronald Reagan was in office. So if you think you've got some hot burning break the presses news about what's going on in the world, slow your roll. I've probably heard it, or some previous variation on it. No offense. I'm not being a jerk. I'm letting you know that you don't have to update me that the Federal Reserve is neither a part of government nor actually in, holding gold in reserve. Like, all the things. I've heard them before. Most of them. There's probably a few out there that I haven't, because I, dear friends, try to avoid working in absolutes. So I try to avoid making broad, monolithic, absolutist statements. When I make social commentary, I am always attempting to speak in the most impersonal and theoretical terms. I say this, friends, because I find that a lot of people take my commentary really, really personally. And they're out there on a hair trigger, friends. And if I say something's a bit of malarkey, they think I've told them that they are evil, malicious liars, which I have not. I've said that idea as I see you presenting it. I don't know if you think that's a personal idea you invented or if that's just something you're retweeting, but that idea seems to be comprised of malarkey. Totally different thing, right? To say, I don't think this idea works, or to say, you're a stupid doo-doo poo-poo head. I don't run in with a flaming bag of poop excrement, of mental excrement, and throw it at your doorstep. I ask you questions and make observations that I think, if you step outside of boxes that people sometimes don't want to, stand up, right? One of those boxes is political ideology is a treadmill of distraction. If you're going to come at me with you're wrong because this political ideology that I believe in is right, I'm going to go, okay, cool, but have you stopped to consider that all political ideology is a treadmill of distraction, generating conflict, designed to make you argue with your fellow human being over political ideology about how to be a human being instead of being a good human being. And here's where I get cuckoo crazy, friends. Here's where I go flying past at light speed beyond that which whatever new age thing is new agey, and go away somewhere crazy. There just might be. Take a deep breath and follow me here, because I'm going way out there, folks. I'm out on a limb. There just might be some things that humanity as a species, as a living organism on this living womb that is trying to give birth to all living organisms, there just might be some activities that the human species is supposed to be doing, not because I say so, Not because some made-up imaginary cartoon figure of a thing we call God says so, but because it is necessary for the universe to do the things that it needs to do. Because it is a living thing, and it has things to do. And we are like leaves on a tree or probiotic bacteria in the appendix. We are just little tiny things that are part of a bigger thing that's part of a bigger thing that's part of a bigger thing. Crazy, I know, right? And political ideology is by definition, by form, and by function, a treadmill of distraction. From what? From other distractions, which are a treadmill of distraction from what? And it loops around for a bit there, but ultimately is distracting us from these things that I dare suggest to you, friends, these activities, these jobs, this spiritual work that we can, could, should, would, might, very well, ought to be doing, and kind of aren't, most of us, at all. Hardly. Except for the most profoundly inspired and delightfully, invested in their spiritual jams. And that even they, for this is attendant at the center of my whole worldview, there is no one so spiritually advanced that they cannot do more spiritual work here and now that will benefit themselves, their own healing, and that of the human species. Put a pin in that sentence. You got to unpack that. But I digress. Where was I? When I make... have I already said this? I do have some notes from before. Like I said, this show is real, raw, and radically unscripted. But I do, for the purposes of trying to contain the madness, make myself some notes and, have some things I've drafted up. I am never, when I say things, I'm never trying to take it to a personal attack place. Although sometimes I fail, right? But it is important for me to posit that I'm speaking in the broadest terms possible based on a wide range of experiences and observations, and that is the level of public discourse I invite everyone to participate, and that we need to do that more all together. And we're coming around the bend, folks, almost there, towards the end of the thoughts I had collected for today's episodes. Within the framework, if I may tell you, within the framework of my worldview and my meta-thesis about what we may jokingly say is, quote, what the fuck is actually going on here, which I'm working on, and which I am always open to amending and updating with new ingredients, which I have not been laboring on just recently, but have been delving into deeply for the vast majority of my thinking life. Within that framework, I do indeed take the liberty of taking certain things for granted, quote unquote, as in they are operational assumptions, like up is intrinsically inseparable from down. That I don't like axiomatic truths, but there are some things that are so real in the universe that have been so clearly vetted and that can be so easily tested once more, and that very, very unlikely to be broken. For example, no matter how specifically you want to only go up, down is always immediately down from up. Left is immediately left from right, right? And that these things are inseparable from each other, right? And that they are very real, and that you want to call them absolute, but they are actually very relative to the being which is observing the directionality. And that you cannot separate that from the universe. The universe intrinsically contains that, and it's an operational assumption, right? Okay. Why did I point that out? Because there's an aggressive effort to try to undermine these operational assumptions. And I have a collection of my own that I take as not for granted in the dismissive way, in the rude, chauvinist cliche of a wife-beating, horrible narcissist of a man kind of way. to go to a terrible place of comedy, and come stumbling back from that going, why did I go there? But in a discerning way. Is the distinction clear? Because those are two different ways to use that word. Taking certain things for granted, as in that they are understood, they have been acknowledged, they don't need to be argued or relitigated. That's what I mean. That they are operational, and that's the way in which I'm using the term taking things for granted, or accepting things as taken for granted. As in to say that the idea is understood to be a plane, generally speaking, by default, whether or not it is overtly called out. And that I'm not really interested in arguing and relitigating. And those things, I think, are valid. But always welcome the questioning of, I'm just not going to go into some crazy argumentation over, right? Because, yes, question everything. I put these things there because I think I've questioned them enough to realize that they can be easily confirmed. That's why I take them for granted. They are granted. Go confirm them for yourself instead of arguing with me, right? If you hold your breath long enough, you'll really need to take a breath and it'll hurt. If someone forces you not to breathe, you'll pass out. That's functional reality in life. There are things like that that are really, really big and not as obvious. And we have fun exploring them on this show. So I just need to identify that that's one of the ways in which I work. I have never and will never demand that anyone just blind faith agree with me. All opinions, assertions, declarative statements, theories, suggestions, ideas, etc. are genuinely my own, and no one, no person, nor entity, nor corporate system of any kind other than the audience itself and the monetization of the product itself is paying me to say what I say. And I assure you, friends, no one is coercing me to say the things I say. It troubles me that I've noticed that in a tangible way that there's a misconception that seems to be floating around out there in amongst some people that are not super familiar with the show, but are aware that my show is what I'm working around on the various social media platforms. And it appears that there's this presumption that this is a big budget, big production deal. It's just me, folks. There is no graphics department. There is no legal department. There is no booking department. It's just me. I make the graphics. I come up with the talking points based on all the things that I'm shared with you, et cetera, et cetera. And no matter how much people derisively say, yeah, right, dude, you're just a shill for the blah, 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 insert here, whatever they're fucking going on about, it's just me. And yes, I'm monetizing the show. And yes, I'm trying to see if this is something that goes viral and picks up and that lots of people listen to, because the system has tried to shank me hard. And so I'm trying to jump on one of the bouncy platforms of supposedly, democratizing the internet so you can bootstrap yourself into success. Let's have some of it, folks. And your helpful listening is totally a part of that community building process, folks. So I thank you, dear listeners, quite sincerely. And as a sort of rounding the corner and getting into the final bit of disclosures and statements about the show, yes, here's one that's very important. Yes, I realize just how, quote, batshit crazy, close quote, some of this may sound. If you calling me crazy is your best and first and earliest response to my show, LOL out loud, you ain't the first, you won't be the last. It's no skin off my teeth, it's no blood drawn, it's no nothing. It means zero to me if that's what you got to do. It's like bugs on a windshield while driving through the Grapevine on a sweltering summer evening. Like, thanks for playing. Next. Oh, you said that too? Great. Moving on. But hey, it's your perfect right. I'm not saying don't do it. Call me crazy. Post the comment on the Facebook page. It helps my analytics. Go to Spreaker.com and say, dude, you crazy. But don't do that and then refuse to listen to the show and be unable to explain to me why I'm crazy. Because then you just look like someone with a hammer that only has, belittling and putting other people down as their only mental tool. That's not a good look. I know, I'm a cuckoo nut job, new age weirdo talking about probability waveform functions and fractals and Terence McKenna. But trust me, there's a method to my madness. And there's a point that I'm trying to point you in the direction of. Having said all that, dear friends, I want to close with this. Namaste. And when I say it, I effing mean it. Right? The light that is the consciousness within my phenomenological experience acknowledges the light that is the consciousness within your own. Not because someone told me to believe that, but because phenomenologically I can no longer deny that is the reality, that is the case. And that understanding that, we can ultimately transcend any crazy, programmatic, ideologically driven discernment problem or judgment problem or disagreement problem. If we are to have a successful conversation, friends, in my humble opinion, we must all be aware of the fact, recognize openly, that we, as individuals and as a collective, are not monoliths. You are not a monolith. I am not a monolith. Calling me a monolith of stupidity will not prove your point, no matter how vicious it may sound when you drop that mic, because no one is. Am I a bumbling moron? Of course I have been. Have you not? I ask you quite humbly. I literally am a person who has professionally been paid to put on clown makeup and make people laugh. Do you think that has led me to a deeper understanding or a complete lack of understanding that we are all flawed human beings? I wonder. I tell you, it has led me to a deeper understanding. No matter how much you may giggle that I once was paid professionally to be a performing theater clown in the international physical theater circuit, we are relativistic and subjective beings, each and every one of us. No one is so righteously pure that they cannot use a little bit of humility. No one is so humble that they cannot, work a little harder on that humble pie. And